Christians, one of the things that I cannot escape is that I was taught to read the Bible sort of as a manual. And that it had all of the answers, and if you just dug deep enough, you too could have the answers. And that worked for me, especially in that stage of maturity. That really worked for me. I outgrew that. I know that some people, it worked for them for their whole life, and I say bless you. For me, I started asking some questions that the text didn't seem to provide the answer for. And so I went on a long journey. I went on more than a 10-year journey to sort of learn about how do other perspectives read scriptures, how do other traditions approach sacred text. Even within the Christian tradition, how do different people see this amazing collection of works? One of the things I've always struggled with is that if it was supposed to be an answer book, why didn't it read more like an owner's manual to a VCR? Not that those are helpful, but that I'm just talking about format. Why wasn't it formatted to look more like an owner's manual, right? Like if there were 4 spiritual laws, why were they not all located back to back in the same place in the Bible? Why did we have to keep turning 20 and 40 pages at a time to find the 4 spiritual laws? Right? So I was always a little unsatisfied with this. But the thing that confused me the most was if this thing was a manual for life and faith, why was so much of it in story? Because story can be pretty elusive. Like two people can read a story and get 4 different things out of it. Unlike a manual, right? It just didn't seem to function like a manual. And then I came to this amazing realization that set me free, which is that the divine is a storyteller. And once I embraced that idea, I started to see things in the text that I couldn't see when I thought it was a newspaper report. When I read it like a police blotter, I couldn't see into the text. I couldn't see behind the text. In fact, I never really thought about the artistry that it took to write a gospel. I viewed them more as reporters, right? Columbo, just the facts, man. Right? Is that how that goes? No, something's wrong.
Yes.
I just didn't want somebody to fact check me later. Because texts and stories and gospels are rich and they're elaborate and they're multi-layered and they're deep. But what I never knew, and only came to recently, is that the reason we have 4 gospels is because there's an artistry in the telling of a story. This is why we have committed to letting Luke tell us the story that Luke wants to tell us, and not demanding that Luke have the same story, say, as Matthew maybe, or as John, that we're going to let Luke tell us the story that he wants us to hear, right? We're doing the same thing with Job, by the way. Once you realize that Job is, and even if it's based on historical events, but that Job is a theatrical play, that it's like a plot to a Broadway musical, I am getting more out of this book than I can possibly explain to you. I've never really liked Job, right? It seems like a very negative story. Well, it starts off very negative. But it's actually in the wrestling. The friend's trying to figure out, what do I say to this guy? And Job trying to figure out, like, am I full of hot air? Have I been sold a bad product? In the wrestling, there is stuff coming to the surface that I'm like, Job's better than Shakespeare. Honestly, I am blown away by the caliber of the literature, of Job, of the writing in Job. It is better than Shakespeare. And the characters twist and turn and they accuse each other of things and they dip and they dive and then it'll pop up in some place you don't realize. If you haven't read Job in a while, don't read it alone. It stinks. It stinks alone. Like, don't think like, oh, I've always said I was going to read through the Bible. Maybe I'll pick that up this winter. Don't read Job alone. Reading Job in community, people see things in the text and hear things in the voice of the character that you can't get alone, because we all bring such different experiences and perspectives to the table. It is blowing me away. All of that is to say, we come to this famous story of Jesus calling his first disciples, who were fishers. No, that's the thing. They were just fishers of fish. Right? That's the fun part of the story. They were fishers of fish, and then they became fishers of men, or humans, right? So that's a fun little wordplay. But as we have been going through the Gospel of Luke, one of the things we've been looking for is we've been giving Luke the benefit of the doubt that, like a quilter, Luke knows what Luke's doing and ultimately is going to show us something, right? The pieces that he stitches together, that he's put them in a pattern the way that he intentionally, and that if we see where the seams are and where the stitches come together, we're going to see more in the text. And I think that's been going really well. But that's not the approach we're going to use today. In this story, I just want to sit on this one square of fabric. We're not going to talk about how it's connected to all the other squares today. That'll be next week. We can start doing that again. Today, I just want to look at the beauty within this one square in the quilt. And I noticed something, that if you just sit with these 11 verses, there are actually 3 pairs of in and out. Jesus gets into the boat. They take him out, right, to teach. He calls the disciples in. He has them put the nets out. And then he calls them, right? And reading the way that Luke tells this story, I realized that after all of the hectic stuff of the last couple weeks of Jesus preaching his first sermon, which went terribly well, terribly, almost cost him his life. I'm glad I've never preached a sermon that bad, at least that I know of. And then he casts out a demon and he heals Peter's mother, right? And all of it's gotten a little hectic. Luke's picked up some pace. And this week, in this one square on the quilt, we take a breath. And this in and out is the breathing of the text. Luke is letting us breathe a little bit. In a quieter moment, out by the shore, Luke is letting us see that faith exhales and inhales. This is the new moon and the full moon. This is the winter and the summer, right? This is the high noon and midnight. That life and faith breathe. High tide and low tide. The sea comes in and goes out. And Jesus, by interacting with his disciples, by entering into their world, stepping into their boat, ends up calling them out into a bigger ministry. This is how God works with us. That's what I'm seeing in this one square of fabric today. That how you spend Monday is as important to God as how you spend Sunday. That how you are at 7 a.m. is as important as how you are at 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. Because life breathes. And so whether you are just entering a career, maybe some of you are training for a new career, maybe you're in a second career of life, some of you have retired. This is about vocation and dedication. That's what it means to be a disciple. That what you do and how you spend your day, how you get a paycheck, and what you do with your bank account all matters in the life of faith. There isn't one day of the week that is sacred and everything else is secular. There isn't one place on earth that is a sanctuary and everything else is a battlefield. Here's the trick of seeing life and faith this way. Wherever you go, that place is holy. And whoever you're with, that moment is sacred. It all matters. Jesus wasn't afraid of these guys who in that caste system were sort of lower level. Like we might call them blue collar, but that doesn't do it justice. So they were born into this lot of life. And it wasn't an elevated or celebrated lot. Jesus wasn't intimidated by that. In fact, he entered into that world with them, and from that very place, made that boat and that shore a sanctuary. He proclaimed the good news of God's love. These men who had no official training, he saw as the perfect vehicle to take the good news out into the world. So I want to say to you today, I don't know how you spend your days. I don't know where you get your money. I don't know what your plans are for the future, but I'd like you to consider something this morning. It all matters. That who you are when you're here and who you are when you're not here, both matter. On your good days and your bad days, God is with you. On your mountaintop experiences and in the shadows of the valley of death, in both of those places, God is watching. And in the in and out of the breathing, in new seasons of life, when we retire, in new opportunities, when seasons come to an end, when we enter into new love, when relationship goes its separate ways, in all of these things, in death and in life, it matters. Vocation is one of these really unique things that in the Christian tradition says, whatever you do for a living and however you spend your day and whatever you're trained to do is ministry. That who you are when you're not here and how you interact with other people, that's discipleship. And so in your Monday and your Friday night and your Sunday morning, these are the places that are sacred. When you are at the hospital receiving treatment, that becomes a sanctuary for God's presence, for God is with you. When you are alone, walking and enjoying the trees, you are never alone, for God is with you. When you're sitting across the table from a friend, that's communion. You're at the table of the Lord. When you are here and we sing together, when you are alone and journaling your thoughts, in all of these places, it matters. The in and the out. When you are employed and when you are unemployed. When you are doing the thing that makes you come alive and when you are punching the clock. When you are the older sister and when you are the younger sister. In all of these, it matters. God is with you. Therefore, where you are is holy. And every moment you find yourself in is a holy moment. And every person you come across is a place of God's revelation. It all matters. I want to talk about this in a little bit when we gather in our smaller groups. But right now I just want to show you a video. And I want to let you think about what you just heard and see if any of it stuck. If anything pricked your imagination, if anything is something we could talk about